Hello. Okay, I'm going to make John host as well, just in case.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was right, but now I'm a mental block.
Looks like
Hi, Lawrence.
hello there, James. How are you doing?
Good, good. Don, Carol, Luda, hello.
Great.
Is everyone.
Hello, how are you?
And only 2 agenda items this evening, I see, Lawrence.
Yes.
You got to quit scaring everybody away.
Well, yes, I shouldn't I? There's Tori, and she's co-host. That's good. Is everyone seeing a white screen that says Board of Architectural Review large?
I do.
Great. Okay. Can John or Tori hit the button that says Start Webinar?
I already did. I did so just a moment ago. I figured you
Great.
So we're no longer in practice and are alive.
Very good. Well, then it's a little bit early, but I think everybody's on.
Okay.
Not quite.
Okay.
Almost.
Lawrence, when you give me the all clear, we'll start.
Whenever you are ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Welcome to the February 23rd, 2022 BAR Large Virtual Meeting. My name is John Robinson. I serve as the chairman this afternoon and early evening. The other board members present this afternoon are Luda Sobchuk, who will recuse for agenda item number 1, James Metters, Carol Wheeler, who is graciously serving as our alternate today in the absence of regular members of the board. City staff present are Tori Parrish and Lawrence Courtney. The order of the meeting will be as follows. There will be an introduction and overview of each project by city staff to the board and for the public. This is followed by an application presentation, which consists of a 10-minute period with reasonable extensions granted by the chair. And any questions of the applicant by board and staff, any and all presenters should clearly state their name for the record. Persons affiliated with the project, be they owners, developers, designers, consultants, or others, should speak during this portion of the meeting rather than during public comment. This is followed by the public comment period. There's first written public comment. Written comments are due the business day before the meeting and are transmitted to the board as soon as possible thereafter. Unless determined necessary by the chairman, the written comments will not be read aloud during the meeting. This is followed by live public comment, 2-minute time limit per speaker, or is determined by the chair. The applicant does not respond to comments made during the public comment period. Again, any member of the public speaking should clearly state their name and address for the record. This period is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. Then there's an applicant response or clarification period to either public comment and or city staff comments and recommendations. This period should last no more than 5 minutes. The applicant then takes a seat and speaks only when called upon by staff or the board. This is followed by board discussion and a vote on each agenda item. The applicant presentation and public comment at this point is closed. The applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising their hand and waiting to be called upon, but otherwise may only speak if asked a question by a board member. This is a note that agenda items 2 and 4 have been deferred by the applicants. This is a reminder to please turn off cell phones and other potentially disruptive devices. Applicants and the public are reminded that comments should be limited to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns, are not the purview of this board and therefore cannot be voiced here. Let's see. Additional public protocol. Please note the following updates to public participation. I covered them briefly, but this is it in more detail. So beginning in 2021, and for all subsequent meetings, the deadline to submit written comments is 12 p.m. one business day before the meeting. The deadline to speak live at a meeting is 12 p.m. the day of the meeting. Written comments are received by the board in advance and will be acknowledged, but will only be read into the record if required by the chair. If this is a concern, you are encouraged to sign up and speak at the meeting. Additional public comment instructions. You can use one of the following methods to submit written comments or to sign up to speak at the meeting. Please provide your name, address, telephone number, meeting date, and project number that you wish to speak about. You can log in by going to citizen participation form at innovate.charleston-sc.gov or call into 843-724-3765, or you may mail your comments to the Department of Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability at number 2 George Street, Charleston, 29401. Additional meeting procedures and protocol. Staff controls the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the required deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask the staff to advance to whichever slide or sheet they want to show us. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name when speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, as opposed to board members and staff, will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Chat and QA functions associated with Zoom are disabled. Additional protocol regarding public comment. The applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have been registered will be called upon in order by project. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public will not be called on, and written comments have already been reviewed by the board in advance. Protocol for the board. Board members will be polled by this is during our voting period. Board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments in their vote on a motion. Each member when voting should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim. The board member making the motion should correct the chairman if I have not correctly reread it. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will temporarily be removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item that they can sit on. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will temporarily be turned off until we are ready to return to the regular meeting. Ms. Parrish, what's agenda item number 1?
We're starting with 26 and 28 Cumberland Street. The request is conceptual approval for the construction of a new multifamily building on a property having facades along Cumberland, State, and Lingard Streets. The new building incorporates the existing historic building on Cumberland Street. It's in the French Quarter, Height District 3.5, and in the Old and Historic District. And then you'll remember this from the last time because we had a vote for demolition, some partial demolition 2 weeks ago. So sorry. But the red outline shows the extent of where this project will sit. And you'll see the 3 streets that it has frontage on. And then a view taken from Cumberland Street with the historic building right there at the front. And another view looking west on Cumberland Street and looking east. And then a couple of more context slides here. The old Sanborns, just for reference. In the 1955 Sanborn, you'll see the 2 structures that are incorporated into the project. All right, and with this one, we've got Mr. Eddie Bello and Mr. Artemis Zeltov, and they have been promoted to the meeting.
Very good. Mr. Bello, you have the floor.
Okay, well, thanks can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right, well, thanks everybody. As Tori said, we were here just 2 weeks ago in the last BAR meeting, and we had a couple of items to address the board felt like before we should move on. So I'm going to focus most of the presentation on those changes. They weren't a ton of them, but I do want to, I know that Ms. Wheeler was not here last time, and it's a fairly complicated site, so I will go through it quickly, and you can ask questions if need be, but I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I don't want to set it too short. So next slide, please, Lawrence. Okay, next slide. So y'all know the site. It does front Cumberland, State, and Lingard Streets. All 3 streets, interesting, are fairly different contexts, and we tried to address that in our design. Next slide. I'll try to go through these fairly quickly. So again, we've got some historic buildings that are part of the project. On the bottom right picture, that yellow building that's painted brick, that is incorporated into our project. The ground floor will be commercial, top floor will be one of the units. This is a residential project, condominiums. Next slide. Some other context photos. It's interesting, the Marshink building, a 1940s building that was built as just a sort of a magazine storage facility. I'll talk more about that, but it's interesting. It's almost on dead center with Philadelphia Alley. So we went back out and looked at that. The bottom right picture shows the intersection of State and Cumberland. That's that empty parking lot, which we're going to fill in with building. Next slide. Just some other context shots. The one on the bottom right is probably the most relevant. That is Lingard looking east, and that's Tommy Condon's to the right there, with the Luttrell Hotel. The back of that, or the side of that, is right next to our building, and then the Luttrell on the bottom left, just that's what the State Street frontage looks like. We're going to be directly to the south of that. Next slide. And like I said last time, we looked at a few things as inspiration. The middle photo which is one broad, and then the Wagner building at the bottom. There's sort of a precedent in Charleston for larger buildings to handle the corner in a certain way to make some kind of architectural move, and we like that. The building to the left is the Crest Building. The Marshink building has some Art Deco details, and so we don't want an Art Deco building, but we're kind of inspired by some of that detailing. And I've always loved the Crest Building, and it's one of our better Art Deco buildings. And I think if you look at how those window openings are treated, where there's some recesses, and I think that's terracotta. We like that detail, and also the detail for how those metal panels are treated in between the windows, the sills, and the heads we really like that. And then the top right's that's just a building in Soho, but we like the simplicity of the rhythm of the masonry with the openings and glazing behind it. Next slide. And again, the tradition of Charleston corners, you see it all over the city, sort of eclipsed corner with an entry. Next slide. And then this is a new image. You'll see on the Cumberland side, we have a lot of terraces and porches, and there aren't a lot of masonry buildings with porches. We did think of the old Marine Hospital on Franklin Street as a good precedent for how that's handled. So we went and looked at that. Next slide. And then finally, like we said last time, we've always been kind of inspired by the Marshink building. Next slide, please, Lawrence. It's a humble, little simple building, small in scale, but it does have some interesting details that we wanted to pick up on. And we also picked on how, if you look at the front facade, there's a stepping of the facade. There's a larger, both in vertically and in massing from the street. Next slide. All right, so here's the site plan. Cumberland's on the bottom, State is to the right. And so, like I said last time, the entire project starts with how the Marshink building is treated. We're very aware of, we're putting in a large building here. We did not want to overpower that small building. It's a one-story building. So the first thing we did was, on either side of the Marshink building, we have open space. And that's so that when you walk down the street, you'll experience sort of the original volume and the scale of that Marshink building. That was that first big move. We also, again, we've got a lot of things to manage on the site. Another thing we have to do is get cars in and out. So we put the driveway, you can see, thank you, Lawrence, adjacent to that other historic building. And that's the oldest, very old building. That's pre-1880s. That's an old coal shed. So that historic facade, which is just a simple brick facade, would always be exposed. So you can see in the site plan, we're trying our best to be respectful of those historic buildings. Next slide. Yeah, so we've got previous and proposed floor plans. So I think it's more important to look at the elevations on those. So if we could just skip through that. One thing I did want to point out too, just the history of the site has been kind of always industrial up until recently. There was a train line that went along Lingard, which I didn't know about until we saw some old maps. I always knew about the train line that was on State. There was a coal shed here. There were tenements. There were shops. This supported the working waterfront just a block away. And so, while we don't want our building to be industrial looking, there was never an intention to try to put like a large mansion style house that you might find on East Battery or South Battery. So it was always a more restrained approach to how we sort of designed the building. Sorry, that was a little bit side note. Next slide, I'll kind of explain things. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Next one, Lawrence, sorry. So the second and third floor plans are fairly similar. Next slide, let's skip to the fourth. Next one. These haven't substantially changed from last time. So the big sort of move that we've always had is that the fourth floor is recessed from the main component of the building. So we're in a 3.5-story district, and we are asking for a little more than the 50%. It's in your information. I can't remember what the amount is. We feel like, and I'll go through it, but we feel like we earned that on the architectural merit for a number of reasons. One, because you read a 3-story building from the street, it's very recessed. Two, because of all the work we're doing to respect all those historic buildings we're working around. Another reason is most of the height that we have is sort of away from the street. And then the last thing is that in this block, the height is certainly appropriate. Next slide. Next slide. Skip this, y'all know this stuff. It's interesting. Okay, so this is the view from State, looking down Cumberland there to your left, and this is the sort of the new version. This view has not changed a whole lot from last time. I think the main comments we heard last time were really that the State Street facade and the Cumberland Street facade were a little too dissimilar. Part of that's because the Cumberland Street facade has all the terraces on it. You know, it's southern facing, that's where the view is. We did not think that porches made sense along State, and regardless, they didn't work as well together. So I'll show that change. You can see it a little bit now. But another comment was how we handle the transition from State to Cumberland. So we still want to keep our sort of somewhat bold move. So the building differentiates itself a little bit on the corner there, but we now have that bottom, this is all metal panel, that bottom band now follows the profile of the brick. And so, I'm sorry, I haven't really explained the materials, but the materials are a very light white brick, as white as we can get, metal panels, and then at the top floor, dark stucco with metal panels. And this is a good view of how we've recessed that top floor. Of course, you're going to see it, but we want the 3 stories to read on the street. We've also picked up some cues from the Littrell building just to our north, aligning with some of those elements so that it continues some of that streetscape around the block. Next slide. It's kind of hard to see here. The changes aren't super dramatic in this view. So next slide, Lawrence. Just a pure elevation. I think the next slide will show better. Next slide. So again, this just shows simple proportions. We designed the Littrell next door, and it's a very rich, detailed brick building, a lot of layering. This one, we wanted some of that, but we wanted this building to be a little bit lighter and a little bit cleaner so that these two buildings work together. They work together, but they're not the same. And so this building's a little lighter in its detail. Next slide. Again, existing and yeah, this is a good view. That's okay. Next slide's good. All right. So this shows really, if you remember from last time, our major change to the design, which was really bringing the rhythm of State Street, that proportion, around to the Cumberland Street side. So that's all, those are all porches. These are the only outdoor spaces for these residents. So the porches are very important to our client and for people that would live here. Next slide. I think this is probably the best one that shows. So the one on the left shows what we had before. The porches are the same size, but they were much more open. And I think the comment was this is just too dissimilar from what's happening on State. And the proportions were getting a little too horizontal. So we just brought around a lot of that same rhythm to the State Street side. One thing that I think is important, as you walk down the street level, the first floor is very consistent. So, what you'll experience on the street will be very consistent. It'll feel like one building. This also shows we got rid of the corner column. I think that was a staff comment, which we like. It funny enough, it seems like if you take that column away, it kind of makes that corner stronger. Next slide. Just a detail, this is showing State again. You can see the recesses. Again, it's a little bit of a recalling of how, like I showed you on the Crest Building, how the windows step in. You can see we've got some fluting in the metal panels there in between the windows. Just some subtle detailing, some recesses, some reveals. And then at the top, it's all stucco again, but treated differently, stucco metal panel, treated a little differently so it recedes more as a rooftop element. Next slide. So this is Cumberland. And again, just simple. You know, we want it to feel elegant, but we want, you know, outdoor spaces for everybody. These are fairly large porches, which is nice. Next slide. And you can see, again, the one on the left and the one on the right, you know, the proportions are more vertical on the right, and it does relate better, I think, to the State Street elevation. One thing is Cumberland's a bit smaller scale than the other streets, and so it makes sense porches are on the southern facade anyway, but it's kind of nice to have a little bit more openings on that side. Next slide. Just an aerial showing how some of the massing works, and you can kind of read how that top floor works. Next slide. Try not to take too long though. Next slide. We'll get back to those images. Next slide. This just shows how we calculated the roof. Technically, we're required to have a section. Next slide. Here's a full, pretty full elevation facing a southern elevation looking north. Next slide. I think the other images talk about the building a little better. Next slide. I think this view is good. Let me see. Yeah. So, like I said, we spent a good bit of time thinking about the Marshink building and the relationship of this building to it. You know, like I said before, this is going to be the front door for the people living here. This is where the lobby is. People are going to come and go from the Marshink building, which we love. And you look at how the Marshink building, again, it's a simple building, but how the massing works. We did that with our building as well behind it. We intentionally stepped it back. We changed the language of the facade right behind the Marshink building. You can see it there. It's the only place where the building sort of changes with these window sizes. Again, not replicated, but just responding to that building a little bit more directly. One change that we made from last time is those two porches on either side were all steel. In this case, we've carried around the same porch detailing that we have on the rest of the Cumberland Street facade. This is also a good view that it shows how far back the buildings are shifted or pushed to give you sort of that real feel for how you'd experience the Marshink building as you walk down the street. Next slide. There were some comments from the public last time about the impact on the Marshink building. I'll address that maybe later, but we did go back out to Philadelphia Alley. I walked it again just to, you know, sort of reconfirm how I was thinking. And yes, you're going to see our building behind the Marshink building unless we push this back, you know, 800 feet. You're going to see it, but I think the impact on it is not going to be that much, especially as you walk along Cumberland. And this view just kind of shows that. Next slide. Another view. This is a good view of Cumberland looking west. Again, real simple. One change we did make, this is sort of a detail, more of a preliminary thing, but if you look in the inside the porch, we have to have dividers because these are between units. We changed that detail to more of a Charleston louvered detail. Again, we've got to do some detailing, but the idea is it adds a little bit of richness, makes these feel a little more Charleston, but it kind of helps break up that sort of how those porches feel. Next slide. Again, just showing, you know, got to get the cars in. This is a good view showing how the cars, that entrance is pushed back. It's not right up on the street like you'd see in other areas. And then to the left, that's a, you know, that's that wide open. You will always see that historic facade there on that the oldest building on the whole site. Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Next slide. Just another view. I think this shows how you can, you know, again, the Marshink building is still kind of standing alone. Next slide. Almost done, y'all. All right, so this is a building section. You'll never see this from anywhere, but it kind of shows, you know, how this building works with the buildings around it. This is looking east. If you cut a section through That's the Tommy Condon's building there on the left. Next slide. And so there's an existing courtyard there now. We are building in that courtyard. This will be minimally visible from the street. You'll be able to see it sort of looking through this archway, but we just thought it's important to show everybody how that works. Next slide. All right, and then Lingard. One of the big comments last time was that, you know, on this part of the building, there is a club room and a pool. So this is sort of the common deck area for the residents, sort of a amenity. And what we had last time, we extended the top part of this to sort of frame out that space up there. And the comment was, you know, maybe that's not working as well as it could be. I don't think that anybody is super concerned about height on that street. I mean, across the street is basically one continuous 4-story hotel building. So I don't know that height's an issue as much as just how it was handled. So we kind of did the simple thing and just got rid of it. And I think the building's stronger now. It ties in better. And I think it'll be a better experience for the people using it. Next slide. And that's about it, y'all. I'm going through. Here's just a view looking down. Lingard looking east. I'm sorry, west. Next slide. Again, it just ties into the other building. Real simple. You know, again, we've got to come out. We've got cars here. All the things we've got to deal with. We've got, you know, transformers and switchgear and fire pump rooms and all that. We put that. Yeah, thank you. Lawrence is so good with keeping up with. He knows what I'm going to say next. But we have to put that somewhere. We put it on Lingard. But of course, we're going to treat that well at the street level. Next slide. Yeah, so you can see, if you don't remember it, and again, for Ms. Wheeler, very different. You know, we've basically shortened it a good bit, which, you know, I think the proportions are much better. Next slide. Just a pure elevation there. Next slide. Streetscapes. So this is Lingard. Again, if y'all know the street, it's pretty tall there. And so we're certainly no taller. Actually, we're shorter than most of it. Next slide. This is Cumberland. Different streetscape for sure. Most of this building is pushed back, especially around the Marshink building. Next slide. And then State Street. Again, State Street, interestingly enough, is fairly different scale. As you come down Cumberland from East Bay, it's a pretty broad street there. So our building is only a 3-story building, it feels like, on the corner, but, you know, I think certainly that street could handle a little bit of height. Next slide. I think we're almost wrapped up. Yeah, so again, height, scale, and mass and architectural direction. I think certainly we've tried our best to mitigate the height. Again, I don't know that height's a huge issue here, but we've pushed it back. So yeah, you're going to see it. But the 3-story part of the building is what reads the most as you're on the street. And then again, we're pretty excited about just the direction ourselves, and I hope that the board thinks the same. Next slide. I think it's the nighttime shot, and that's it. Yeah. And so that's it. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Bello. Let's see, public comments.
All right, for this one, we have Ms. Anna Catherine Carroll.
Okay.
Thank you, Tori. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society continues to feel this design presents a high-quality, compatible project that will positively contribute to the context. There have been meaningful improvements from the previous iteration, and in particular, we feel the revisions to the treatment of porches along Cumberland Street and the removal of the top floor framework facing Lingard Street are successful. However, we continue to have concerns with how the new building engages with the historic Marchink building. The board's previous conversation focused on architectural issues, and we now encourage you to discuss the building's massing in relation to this sensitive historic structure. The Marchink building is a rare example of historic Art Deco architecture in Charleston, and we are greatly concerned by how far forward the new building encroaches onto the historic footprint. greater relief should be given to the Art Deco building by setting the new construction further back and allowing its historic form to better read on the streetscape. This board has a strong track record of requiring new construction to respect existing historic buildings as sites are redeveloped, and we encourage you to apply a consistent standard here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Further public comment?
And we have Mr. Justin Schwebler. One moment. There we go. He's in the meeting.
Thank you. Took me a moment to join there. This is Justin Schwebler with Historic Charleston Foundation. Again, we'd like to thank the applicants for their thoughtful responses to the board's comments from the last meeting. Again, we'd like to stress our concern with the encroachment of the new building over top of the Marchshank building, but we think the applicants have responded appropriately to the board's comments from the last meeting, and especially with the addition of the removal of the extra addition on Lingard Street. If the massing is removed, set back from the above the Marchshank building, we'd be comfortable with recommending conceptual approval at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebler. Any response from the applicant?
Well, do I get to respond after city staff too?
Oh, of course.
You forgive me, John?
Recommendations. No, Tori, it wasn't a slight.
Okay. All right, one observation, staff and board comments which were incorporated into the previous motion for this project have been addressed into the project or discussed with staff. These include the elimination of the column at the corner entry in lieu of a cantilevered condition and the elimination of the framework around the pool deck on Lingard Street. And then our staff comments, and I will apologize, there might be a letter missing. While still somewhat skeletal in its expression, the south elevation now has a more colonnaded form, which lends a feeling of greater opacity and less void to the project. This elevation has improved with the addition of the brick pilasters to break the spans of the wide balconies and to harmonize with the rhythm of the east elevation. This addition, in combination with the addition of shutters at the side walls of the south-facing balconies, create the impression of a solid mass behind the balconies, with the balconies divided by lighter shutter partitions. This better conforms to the language of Charleston piazzas and to that of a recessed piazza, similar to the reference precedent of the old Marine Hospital. Two, the project is headed in the right direction, being more compatible with the general language of greater wall surface and punched openings of the French Quarter. Three, adequate space is provided around the Marchshank building to allow for it to retain its separate identity, while a nod to the building is placed in a recessed manner above the building. Four, the vehicular entry, exit, and parking areas remain well developed, being visually downplayed and hidden as much as possible. Five, the wall panels to the east of the pool will be seen from Lingard Street and need to be restudied. These should be made less prominent or should be made into more of a masonry feature wall, limited in width, that could feature an amenity to the pool deck, such as a simple wall fountain or trellis. And six, staff agrees that the existing Marchshank building signage should not be changed. Our recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Tori. Now, Mr. Bella, would you like to have a response?
I would, thank you. So I think a couple things. First, thanks for all the comments from everyone. So last time the board, I basically picked up the staff comments, which Tori just went through, and I feel like we've responded to all of those comments, specifically changing the language on Cumberland to feel less of a void, more continuous nature of the facades, and then really taking off that top part of Lingard. The board did not say that we needed to push back further behind the Marchshank building. So, but I don't want you to think that we didn't study it, because I do appreciate the comments from the preservation groups. We did look at that, and there are a couple of reasons why we didn't do it. One, pushing it back to make it flat, I do not think would make a substantial change to what you would see from the street and how that building would be experienced. It would also substantially affect those units. We basically lose a unit per floor. And to do that, we would have to add, we have to pick up room somewhere. So what I said last time, and I truly believe this, is you forget, we're not building right up against the Marshink building. We have open space on either side. I went down and walked Philadelphia Alley again, and I really believe, the impact of what we're doing is not going to be substantial, whether we push it back another 10 feet or so. So again, that wasn't a board comment last time, but I did not want to think y'all think that we just ignored it. We did go look at it, but we feel like we've responded to all of the board and all of the city comments from last time. And so the other comments from the city, we don't have any issue with. Of course, we'll study those and work on that for next time.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bello. All right. Move to board discussion and potential vote on this agenda item. What do my fellow board members have to say about agenda item number 1?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to go first.
Sure.
Lawrence, if we could, we're going to run through A025 through A036. Eddie, I think the State Street facade looks great. I appreciate the removal of the vertical column on the corner. I think that's great. Transitioning from State Street to Cumberland Street, and if what I'm about to say, if I don't have the right terms that it comes across clear, just tell me and I'll do it a different way. But if I'm looking at the first floor porch deck, and I look at the mass that's below that porch deck, it would seem to me to be appropriate to have that same massing at the second floor. And so in other words, the second floor, our third floor porch deck would look like the second floor porch deck in terms of the vertical profile or the drop down, and not just like a metal beam. So we go from what's underneath the first floor deck to what's at the roof line or the fourth floor deck, but then the middle is just this this metal, and I think that it would look good if that also looked like the first or second floor porch deck, because I think that would help with the depth of the porches. And then if we go, Lawrence, let's see, go to 31. So this doesn't really, I can't see it, as well. It's just not as clear, but you can see if it comes beginning on the east side and goes across, then when you get to the third floor above where it says the Clark, there's a much wider separation between the upper windows and the lower windows, and that area could come across, that wider, thicker appearance at the porch deck level would come across, transition through there, and then transition to the west to kind of have that same thickness all the way across. If you go to 32, and you can see again, if that thickness at the second floor porch goes right through the windows of the third floor and then connects over to the second floor, and 33 and 36. Lawrence, 33 and 36. Yeah, and this shows it better too, just a thicker porch deck on the outside. And then the next one was A40 and 41. So the large panels, I'm assuming those people are like, let's just say they're 6 feet. So that means that panel, I just couldn't see it with my glasses. It's probably 15 feet tall. Something like that, Eddie?
Probably not quite that tall, but probably 12.
Okay. Something like that. So those are the low, where I see the line, that's operable to get in behind it to the equipment.
Right. I mean, honestly, James, we've got to design how that's going to work. Our idea is they'd be panels.
Yeah, and I guess I was just wondering if there was an opportunity there for some kind of different material where we engage the street, because that's a big piece of metal. You know, that,
Yeah.
and those are my all comments, but I think it's great, man. That's it.
Thank you.
Further board comments?
This is Carol Wheeler. It's the first time that I see that project, but I studied the previous presentation and obviously listened to this presentation. And I thought it's really interesting how just a minimal change really to the facade has changed the proportion in a very impactful and positive way. If you look at the Cumberland Street elevation, just by the simple addition of, or by the simple substitution of the steel columns with the brick pilasters or brick columns, you basically solved all the issues that were brought up previously. The plan didn't have to change, the base didn't have to change, and to me it fits very well, or it makes it a very cohesive building just by adding those brick pilasters. I think this, maybe to respond to some of the previous comments as well, I see this building as a 2/1 building, so 2 stories over one, and you know, the second and third floors basically combined. So I think thickening or adding brick to the third floor line, to the third floor line would make the southern elevation more of a gridded elevation. I think the way it is right now, it works very well. The corner works very well. I also think that the only elements that stood out to me when I first looked at it was the facade over the marching building. That's the only place where the language was broken, and I understand now why, that it was basically a nod to the marching building. The 4 single windows there, they just looked a little, they looked like they didn't receive any detail, and the wall to window ratio changed a lot. So it makes you pause when you look at it. And I think those 4 single windows could receive a little bit more detail, but this is more of a preliminary or final review comment. I think that this project is a very good example of a project that is off Charleston and that uses the cues and that takes inspiration from expressions and forms of Charleston. And I think this project actually reacts very well to the marching building. It's inspired by the Art Deco language, but it interprets it in a new way. The massing is a step back. I think it's step back enough to respect the historic buildings. It doesn't max out the property or the zoning envelope, and it truly appears as a 3-story building with a setback 4th floor. So I think that the additional height or the additional area on the top floor is warranted here. And again, it's a very good example how how the massing steps back and creates voids around the existing buildings and respects them. And the color that's kind of, I guess, suggested here in this conceptual approval further distinguishes the old from the new, while still working together.
Very good. Further board comments? Hearing none, can I have a motion?
This is Carol Wheeler. I would propose a motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comments, including the approval of the additional height for architectural merit and context.
I second that, Ms. Jim.
So just to be clear, Ms. Wheeler, the motion is for conceptual approval incorporating board and staff comments and including an additional story for height on the basis of architectural merit, correct?
It's not an additional story, it's just the
Additional height, excuse me. Yep.
The additional height, yeah.
For architectural merit.
Yep.
And Mr. Metters took the second to that. Do you take the friendly little amendment we just did there too as
Yes,
well?
sir.
Okay, great. Proceed to call the roll. Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Matters?
Yay in favor.
Myself, a yay in favor. Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you, Eddie.
All right, y'all have a good one.
Thank you.
Agenda item 2 is deferred. Agenda item 3 is 115 Meeting Street. Ms. Parrish, you want to walk us through that one?
All right, we've got 115 Meeting Street requesting conceptual approval for exterior alterations. This is a Category 1 building, even though it was constructed in 1970, and it's in the Old and Historic District. Got a context slide for you here with the aerial showing where the project is located on Meeting Street at Meeting and Queen. And then a few photos from the street of the Mills House Hotel. And then this is a good one because much of the work is incorporated into this. But this is taken from Meeting Street with the loggia right here to the south side. And the balconies are going to be in the project. This is sorry, we don't practice this. This is looking north on Meeting Street. And then looking south, Hibernian Hall is on the right next to the Mills House. Sanborn maps from 1888. It was constructed in 1853 originally and demolished in 1968, rebuilt in 1970 with 2 additional floors. And with this one, we have Mr. Jonathan Handel. He is in the meeting.
Very good. Mr. Handel, you have the floor when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So this project is, as Tori was teeing up, it's alterations to an existing structure. Although the structure itself is from 1970, it's based on a facade that has that dates back to the 1850s on this site. Most notably for its decorative ironwork on the second floor, which is part of what we're proposing to alter, just to update in terms of code. So the alterations that we propose are really threefold. We're not building any new structures or anything like that. So starting with the most minor and then going into descending order, it's modifying the ironwork balconies such that the top rail height becomes 42 inches. And then if you can you skip ahead, let's say 6 pages. Yeah, page 6. Let's start there by looking at the plan and we can kind of orient. There we go. This is good. Oh, back one. There we go. Ground floor plan. So you see the primary intersection here, Meeting Street and Queen Street. Meeting Street and Queen Street both have the ironwork balconies on the second floor. Hibernian Hall is south of the building, and you can see it on plan north here. And there's a driveway, thank you, between this back facade of the hotel and the historical Hibernian Hall. So on this driveway side, if we go to let's say forward a few pages, let's see to the very last page, you'll see a elevation where we are in the courtyard. We are, oh, okay. Well, let's go back. Yeah, right there. Thank you. So elevation number 2, sort of the lower middle area, we are removing the existing wood gate that is there and replacing it with a fireplace. Now that's on the courtyard side of this wall, but the back side will be brickwork finished in stucco to match the existing pink color that this property is known for. So let's go back to page number 3. And you'll see in the upper left corner are 2, back 1 or 2 pages. Thank you. Yep, back 1 more. And you'll see in the upper left corner of this page, oh, So close. There we go. That is the back wall taken with my back against the Hibernian Hall. So that decorative black painted wood gate is what's being removed. Brickwork is getting infilled and finished in the pink stucco to blend in completely. Upper right corner of this page, you'll see a couple photos of the existing ironwork. What we propose to do is add a band between the existing ironwork posts of matching decorative iron scroll work with, you know, some of the kind of it's a similar vineyard motif. All told will kind of blend with the existing design of the ironwork while making this these balconies habitable by hotel occupants, raising it to the 42-inch height. Currently, they're at 36. And then lastly, focusing on these bottom right photos, this is the entry garden area. What we propose to do, if we skip forward a couple sheets in this presentation, you'll see, yes, so in the upper left corner, that's where this entry garden is. And you'll see a couple keynotes, D3. You'll see that's the existing location of the fence. It's set back several feet, I think 3 or so from the property line. And we plan to modify, keep the fence, but remove it and push it closer to the property line within a few inches to align with the existing facade. You'll see that corner right there, the existing parlor. And that'll bring it in line with the fence work that's on the adjacent Hibernian Hall property. And if we can go forward one more page, it'll give you an idea of the other work that's going into this space is mostly landscaping. We have Glenn Gardner, our landscape architect, planting some hedge work right directly behind the fence. I think we have a rendering in here too that we can pull up. That might be further into our exhibit.
The very last page, Lawrence.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, these are Glenn's drawings. This is demolition, and then here's, you'll see, yeah, some of the new planting. And yeah, this last image is what is proposed. So it involves removing some of the bluestone area with these inlaid brickwork, herringbone pattern with a stack laid border, and but retaining as much of the bluestone as possible outside of those two little areas of infill that flank the entry. What's missing from this rendering is the existing awning. That's to remain. Most elements are remaining exactly as is. The major difference here is our relocation of the existing iron fence towards the property line and the new planting scheme behind it.
And Mr. Handles, that concludes your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. Just making sure. All right, very good. Public comments, if any, on this, Ms. Parrish.
I just lost my pen.
Okay, take your time.
There is no public comment on this one.
Okay, thank you very much. City staff comments and recommendations.
All right. And one observation, this application, while perhaps minimal in scope related to visibility, is brought before the board as this is a Category 1 building. Okay, staff comments. The proposed work on the balconies includes raising the existing panel and adding a horizontal member above and beneath the panel in order to develop a 42-inch tall guardrail for the balconies. The Secretary of Interior Standards recommends the identification of character-defining features so that code-required work will not result in their damage or loss. However, there appears to be no demonstrable or compelling reason to alter the balconies. In combination with the cornice, the balconies are salvaged elements of the original Mills House Hotel, which was constructed in 1853, and these are the character-defining features of this building. The proposed work will alter the proportion of the balcony bay openings and will diminish the ornate and intricate scroll work, which dominates the balconies. Therefore, altering them is not recommended. 2, the proposal includes in-ground uplighting to illuminate the columns at the loggia on Meeting Street. BAR has traditionally discouraged the use of uplights on non-civic buildings, and these should be eliminated. 3, the proposed work in the courtyard is somewhat visible from the public right-of-way through the loggia and via the alley corridor between the Mills House and Hibernian Hall. However, staff finds these changes to be appropriate and takes no issue with the exception of clarification needed on any relocation of building elements, which I believe the applicant has touched on. Our recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments for hardscape elements in front of the loggia and in the courtyard, denial of uplighting on the building and changes to the historic balconies, and deferral for clarification of any elements being removed or relocated, such as the fencing noted to be relocated.
Thank you, Tori. Mr. Handel, you have the opportunity for a response if you would like to exercise.
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll move to board discussion and a potential vote on this agenda item.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I agree with the staff's comments.
Okay. Further comments?
This is Julia. Same here. I'm in agreement with all the comments and recommendations.
Yeah, I would agree that the alterations to the balcony, while I understand well-intentioned, are for me a hard sell on the building that is effectively a replica of its predecessor, in which there are limited historical remaining elements of a much, much older building.
Well, it's not, the details are not showing what exactly alterations are. It's just described as a bar, but what does that mean? So, and yes, proportional is not going to work. So.
Further board comments?
This is Carol Wheeler. I also agree with staff's recommendation, and the issue of the railing height comes up pretty often with historic renovation throughout historic downtown. There's always the issue that the historic railings are 36 inches. But yeah, I think the BAR and city staff has in the past also denied these kind of requests if they are character defining features. I think the hardscape elements that staff is recommending to be conceptually approved, if that recommendation holds, I would think that they could that approve, or the further development of the hardscape elements could go to staff for final approval. But other than that, I would agree with staff's recommendation.
Okay. And so that is that your formal motion, Ms. Wheeler?
I can make a motion. Let's see. I'll make a motion for staff's recommendation as stated in this agenda, including board and staff comments with final details of the hardscape elements to staff.
I second that, Mr.
You want me to repeat that?
If you don't mind. Thank you, Carol.
Okay. I'll make a motion for staff's recommendation as stated on this agenda, including board and staff comments, with final details for hardscape elements to staff.
Your motion, if I've understood it correctly, is for conceptual approval with board and staff comments for hardscape elements in front of the loggia in the courtyard, denial of uplighting on the building, and changes to the historic balconies, deferral for clarification of any elements being removed or relocated, such as fencing to be relocated, and to give final details for hardscape elements to staff.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and we have a second from Mr. Metters.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I'll take down the roll. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote on this motion?
Yeah, in favor?
Mr. Metters,
Yay in favor.
Ms. Wheeler,
Yay, in favor.
myself, yay in favor, 4-0 on this agenda item. Okay, and item number 4 is deferred. That may have set a record for meeting time in the new era of DAR. Tori or Lawrence, do we have any update on the possibility of going back to an in-person option?
We are scheduled to go back in person the second meeting of March. Lawrence was in a meeting yesterday about in-person return. If you want to add anything, Lawrence. But otherwise,
I think that it will be a very exciting time for all of us.
Very good. All right, good. All
Thanks,
right.
Lawrence. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for your service. Thank you to the staff for your continued hard work. And I'll look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.
thank you all so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
See you.